Hello. Today I'll be talking about modern day slavery, or better known as human trafficking. First off, human trafficking is a global issue. And you may ask, what is human trafficking? Well, according to the United Nations, describes human trafficking as the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of people through force, fraud, or deception with an aim of exploiting them for profit. The question is, why is human trafficking so profitable and picked as a form of illegal means compared to other crimes? Well, Terry Hoonan explained that human trafficking is a multi-billion-dollar growth industry because, unlike drugs, which are gone as soon as they are used, humans can be recycled because they can continue to be exploited as they're a better investment for traffickers. Human trafficking statistics and reports. The number of people victimized worldwide to modern-day slavery, according to the Labor Organization in 2016, is 40.3 million, roughly 5.4 victims per every 1,000 people. In 2021, there was a 35 increase from 2020 of child sexual exploitation of a staggering 29.3 million when the National Center of Missing Exploited Children ran their annual reports. In that same year, we saw about 10,000 human trafficking reports made to the United States Nation Human Trafficking Hotline that had about 16,000 victims. As you've seen by the picture, California leads in the most reported cases in the year 2019, and we get roughly 50,000 people are trafficked into the United States each year. Growing numbers and factors based off adverse childhood and experiences, and we'll start off by listing the 5 factors that contribute to the likelihood of human trafficking, which are wars, conflicts, violence, lucrative sex trade of women and children, impact of disasters, climate change, environmental crisis, demand for cheap labor, and finally, perception of easy profit aims demand. As we currently see with the wars going overseas, you'll see probably kids end up being in human trafficking as well, like as the fires in Hawaii. Those are another example of environmental crisis that we'll see an increase of kids being trafficked. Adverse childhood experiences, ACE, which is increases risk behavior and can result in potential targeting. So the more you go up this pyramid, the more likely you are to death, but the more you are as easy target to being into human trafficking. So the pyramid illustrates the stunted growth of natural childhood experience can result in social, emotional, and cognitive impairments, and those that can be tracked by a score of 0 to 10. A study done between 2009 and 2015 showed that participants that held an A score of 6 or higher were reported to being abused by traffickers. Another study in 2017 indicated that sexual abuse was the most reliable predictor of a person exploitation by traffickers. So these are some of the, if you have these, the more you have, the more likely you are to be a target for sex or human trafficking in general. States hotspots in the United States and Mexico. The U.S. leads in exploitation in Texas, California, Florida, New York, and New Jersey, as shown by the darker blue. Most cases are happening in hotels, motels, and truck stops. For the Mexican states, it leads with Baja California, followed by Tamaulipas, Quintana Roo, and the Federal District. And these major cities were known to be one of the biggest hotspots, especially urban cities like Nevada that had the highest trafficking per capita. This picture over here shows how the data from Houston, Texas, having the highest number of calls made to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, while Washington, D.C. had the highest contacts per capita. Types of human trafficking around the world. There are various types of human trafficking that are not well known, but for the sakes of this, I picked 3 that I will cover that include forced labor, organ theft, and forced marriage. Forced labor entails a person to be forced, coerced, or being exploited for labor or services to pay back debt, withhold of pay, identity documents, and substance repayment. The ACLU reveals that the number of victims that are forced into labor fall between 12.3 million people at any given time and 2.4 million resulting from trafficking. Forced marriage. Women and girls are forced into marriage and sexual exploitation, which accounted for 15.4 million worldwide. Those that fall victim to their own partners are promised love, marriage, and later are coerced into commercial sex, forced labor, and voluntary servitude. An example of this would be an abusive partner proposing to his wife or girlfriend to do sexual acts to pay the bills, and then she agrees. In the long term, she keeps getting forced against her will, and the pattern just continues forever. Another form of manipulation would be male perpetrators purposely impregnating her and threatening her to do what he wants by hurting their child. Partners can even use finances, exposure of financial information, especially sexuality is a big one, and immigration status to get them to obey to what they want. The picture here shows how there is more labor exploitation since it has a bigger revenue, and then females are more likely to be put into forced marriage and servitude. But yet they still account for 71% of victims of human trafficking. Organ trafficking. It is a person for organ removal is when a person of vulnerability is exploited, deceived, coerced, or abused for illicit use of organs. Here the picture shows, depending on your country, what the organs would go for, because the most sought after organ would be kidneys, followed by livers and corneas. For all the forms of human trafficking, organ removal is the least likely to happen, with only 300 victims detected between 2010 and 2018. That is due to the complexity of the procedure, the medical skill, equipment, transportation, and for it to actually be successful. Otherwise, it's kind of a waste of time, and it's people just end up dying. Easy targets of this type of trafficking is refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers, with males being the victims, ranging 30 years old as well as the recipient. You kind of have to be a even match. Women cases come from their spouses demanding their wife to donate their organs. Other victims are lured via the internet with promises of payment anywhere between 500 to $10,000. Now we get to technology advancements for human trafficking. Unfortunately, with the use of computer and mobile phones and webcams, human trafficking has gone on social platforms where thousands to millions of people have go on websites like Pornhub and they're unaware that a person can be recruited or against their will or even being groomed to advertise the sale of sexual services. These are just anywhere plain sight domains that we recognize as a world, especially like Pornhub, that goes unaware or a lot of people know about these but just ignore the fact that it could be a victim. Traffickers as now with technology doesn't need the physical location due to the video streaming, where they can stay in one location and continue to be exploited from across the world. So another victim probably could stay in the same room for years and it'll probably go undetected. Since these platforms are so popular, people think it's just consensual and innocent, and it's just another form of entertainment. The LGBTQ community and other populations are very, very affected by sex trafficking for the reason being that transgender individuals lack financial resource to aid their hormone therapy and they don't want to be back to their original, organ. So they put themselves through survival sex. This is 3 to 7 times more likely than their heterosexual population and can lead to a higher risk of being lured into trafficking. Transgender individuals are 7.4 times more likely to be part of the sexual violence than their heterosexual peers since they put themselves out there and they're more likely to be kicked out, runaways, or anything like that. Victims without stable homes become runaways have a 1 in 6 chance of becoming sex trafficked, and then they account for 46% of those that are being part of the LGBT community have run away because of their family rejection. So they're more likely just to be out in the streets, and the pictures just show. Children and human trafficking. Most victims are trafficked by someone they know, a family member, or partner, or spouse. It usually isn't a stranger. Data collected in 2017 showed that 41% of children experiences are first facilitated by family members and or caregivers. Victims, children 12 years old, do not even realize they're victims that make up the 31% of children trafficking cases when the family member is involved. So most of the time, family members make this whole process a lot easier, unfortunately. Family members turn a blind eye and do not report the abuse to protect the credibility and honor of their family, allowing the exploitation to happen. These are kind of those third world countries that is just honor and all that stuff. But you see a lot more boys go into the agriculture and industry for work, and then girls will more likely go into servitude. And then these are the age that they fall under. Global awareness. The fight against human trafficking occurred with the Communal Global in the United States Nations of Office of Drugs and Crime, and it launched in March 2007, and since then has had 160 nations signed to suppress and punish human trafficking. An example of their work is that I really liked that I had to put in here was that regardless of immigration status, trafficked foreigners persons are eligible for federal funded benefits such as healthcare and immigration assistance, and prohibits deportation or removal of a traffic victim, and sometimes offers a pathway to permanent residency. So basically, no matter where you are or where you come from, you will be eligible to possibly get like a green card and get benefits and have a better life. National actions plan to combat human trafficking acts help implement four categories: prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnership. Now we'll get into how the U.S. Department of Justice supports the fight against human trafficking. Just alone, $67 million have been awarded to support of victims assistance programs for domestic and foreign national victims within the United States, which is a huge win. So if anyone that came from a different country is identified as a victim, they are allowed to get these like grants for support. The way that these funds are distributed is 16.5 million goes into housing assistance, 32.6 million case management and specialized services and needs, 1.3 million for human trafficking research and evaluation to further expand and understand for the community and how they can help. And then we have 3.1 million for training and improvement of identification of victims nationwide. If a person has been certified as a trafficking victim under the Victim of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act of the 2000s, they are able to receive the cash assistance, food stamps, Medicaid, and Social Security. The states themselves have now moved to implement their own safe harbor laws since 2015 that offers immunity, affirmative defense, and pretrial diversion to minors that are in commercial sex. So they're just having their own movements and also providing their own services beyond just like the federal government. The law extended a hand by providing medical and mental health services, housing, education, assistance, job training, and legal services as a form of navigating to help them navigate to get back to a normal life that they once had. Now let's take a look at human traffickers' methods of money and how we can combat it. Due to our large sums of profit, traffickers need to resort to using like Bitcoin to avoid traditional financial institutions, so they stay under the radar. According to Flores, well-established traffickers will use banks and deposit their laundered money and earnings. An effort to combat traffickers' finances is through banks by implementing a stricter fiscal investigation, freezing accounts and assets, as well as analyzing and creating new techniques to understand trafficking networks. An example that was used was the 2018 Super Bowl held in Minnesota when the U.S. bank set up an intelligence anti-laundering network to help law enforcement catch sex trafficking searches, and they did have a few of them get caught. I would take a look at Nebraska challenges. Nebraska's legal system has restriction that makes it challenging to the courts to convict a trafficker. They have a really low score of the amount of convictions in the state. This places a burden on the victim that has to go through several processes of reliving their trauma and telling the story to various law enforcement, doctors, and courts. And it further inflicts more pain and even worsens as they have to continue seeing their attacker walk away of accountability if nothing is done at the end. In 2006, Nebraska legislation enacted the Declaration of Human Trafficking to be a federal offense. And then we take a look on this picture right here. You can just see that Nebraska is just overall struggling and grading. It's just not many traffickers get convicted. Since we've seen that Nebraska struggles in convicting criminals of human trafficking, Nebraska now has established their own human trafficking task force known as the Nebraska Human Trafficking Task Force in 2015. Their main mission is to end human trafficking in the state with the help of almost 3,000 trained personnel, and that's anywhere from bank employees, DHS employees, judges, healthcare, community partners, law enforcement, doctors, and the list goes on and on. The State Patrol also helps with the hotline reports and just answering calls about anything related with human trafficking activity. And they also have a well-trained dispatchers on call. And then we have here just where on the big cities of where it tends to happen the most and where these services are just more active because these are the hot spots. Now that we have seen the Nebraska task force in place, now let's talk about Nebraska and their felonies and their prosecutions. The state of Nebraska has required a minimum sentence of 1 year in prison and a max of 50 years for a class 2 felony for labor trafficking. If a child is involved, the sentence carries up to 20 years and a max of 50 years and is seen as a Class IB felony. As of 2016, Nebraska lawmakers have tried to move and make a tougher punishment for human trafficking. If a person is caught in human trafficking or simply the act of profiting for those like that like to recruit kids and women, it is seen as a IIA felony with a punishment of 20 years. Anytime a child is involved, the state doubles their sentencing. Here in the pictures, it demonstrates simply how before the task force was a thing, it was just non-existent, like nothing was happening. After it got implemented, it just skyrocketed and it's doing great. It's showing that it's working as well as here in this other chart, we have more years up to the year 2023, actually. Now I'll share with you Nebraska statistics. Nebraska has 479 cases to the National Human Trafficking Hotline since 2007, with tips for over 1,927 calls. The year 2021 had 57 cases due to 240 anonymous tips with 107 victims and survivors. The average age was between 14 and 30 years old, with women being the majority. There was also 40 high school students that were found to be victims of human trafficking. Nebraska ranked 46 in active human trafficking cases and had only one conviction. In 2024, a new bill was passed named LB 1096 to protect children from sex trafficking cases and potential online exploitation. And then here in the map, you can just see how Omaha, Grand Island, and Lincoln are just major hubs, and they have one of the bigger populations in the whole state of Nebraska. We look at the state of New York and how their government is involved. After the enhancement of freedom of all enslaved people was enforced in the state, it had a major push on how the National Human Trafficking Resources Center was being used and involved. That came for a push for more bills. Out of 55 that were proposed, 25 were actually enacted. One of them was the Assembly Bill 3331 that mandates law enforcement and district attorneys to actually have to advise human trafficking victims of their legal rights and where to find them. The Upstate Task Force was formed by the state's Attorney General office to help law investigations and prosecuting sex offenders. And here is just a map in New York of where the major hotspots are, and it just shows you their division is Western District of New York Human Trafficking Task Force. Some statistics of New York is that they had 1,252 victims that were reported in 2018 alone by New York State Integrity Task Force. 64 were confirmed victims, 20% was sex and labor trafficked victims. The locations are about 40% in New York City, 40% upstate, and 17% in the metro area. 639 victims were in New York in 2024 thus far, and 404 trafficking cases, which makes New York rank fourth on the list of the top 10 worst human trafficking states. The way New York has their punishment is that it is punishable up to 5 years to 25 in prison as seen as a Class B violent felony. As of June 2018, New York made changes and sex trafficking involving a child before this day could not be prosecuted in the New York state level. Now, trafficking of a child is anyone 21 years older and has intentional advances of the purpose to prostitute a child and gain profits, and that said child is 18 years old or younger. To help with the prosecution and charges of a human trafficker, let's talk about New York's task force responsibilities. The New York Human Trafficking Task Force was implemented by the state of Germany, like mentioned earlier, and was supported by civil rights bureaus. The task force supports in cases of prosecution of perpetrators, the support of survivors, and connecting them to the necessary resources and specialists to meet their needs and be able to continue their life. It also is used to gather victim data, increase training, education to law enforcement and other services to provide and elevate public awareness and increase interest to help victims. The budget is 2.3 million and has got an extension for the task force in the next additional 4 years to assist survivors. Besides law enforcement, let's take a look at organizational support for victims. Other supports are awareness campaigns to educate others on human trafficking called Truth About Trafficking and is used on all social platform. Examples of other preventative groups would be Acts of Community Development Corporation, Advocacy Center of Tompkins County, Alternatives for Battered Women's Inc., Isaiah Women's Center, and Women Need, to just name a few. These programs can be found all over the state of New York, but they span to cities like Brooklyn, Lynbrook, Newark, Rochester, Syracuse, Bronx, but in Buffalo, New York. And this picture shows where the safe harbor are fully funded or some of them just partial and just where the need is more needed. Now let's take a look at Florida's troubles and solutions. Due to its large amount of population and tourist attractions, Florida is a prime target for the prevalence of human trafficking with like just having Disney World, all the beaches. It's just a big influx of foreign travelers coming in or just people from the United States from other states. In response, the Department of Health took precautions and held a Hypnosis of Solutions in 2019 that included various agencies, coalitions, organizations, and multi-sector people to help spread awareness and just find solutions on how they can help in each district. The panel addressed factors like women and children, labor trafficking, migrant health, evaluating benefits of human trafficking such as public health, and integrating a system of healthcare in the community. The picture to the side just shows just different brands that fund and donate to the cause and how they just expand the budget and just provide more services to the state of Florida. Florida nonprofits and supports. Um, we have things like Creative Greenbirds, that is a nonprofit that exists with their mission being youth prevention, outreach, restorative care, awareness, and providing rehabilitation for survivors and assistance to find them a secure home to adjust to their new reality as survivors. So nonprofits like this is just they're instilled for the victims that are gonna come to them and they're just trying to get them back to what they used to know. Other organizations are the Florida Alliance to End Human Trafficking that was approved on June 26, 2019 by Florida legislature with a nationwide effort to just end human trafficking. That program has over 20,000 participants and that they have completed a training. The personnel includes legislators, law enforcement, prosecutors, people that are experts in their field like health and social services. Now let's take a look at Florida's statistics. Florida ranks third overall in human trafficking with 4.08 cases per every 100,000 people. The hotline has received 20,000 signals through web chats, text messages, emails, and calls. From those signals, 15,000 victims have been identified to a case. Sex trafficking leads with 574 cases that apparently occur in hotels and motels, and they follow closely by massage and spa businesses. According to the hotline, 82 people were U.S. citizens or permanent residents, with 133 foreign nationals, which makes sense since Florida is a very touristic place, and you have a influx of people, and it's just pretty tragic how people get taken and then possibly never seen again. Let's take a look at Florida's punishment. The penalty for human trafficking in the state of Florida is punishable by state prison in the first degree felony, yet it cannot exceed 30 years or $10,000 or both according to Florida state statute. Cases involving a child 18 years and younger that is mentally incapacitated or defective, then said person is responsible will get a life felony. The poster next to it just gives you a breakdown of what how the investigations go, search warrants, other forensics, and just how it breaks down the convictions. And it shows you that there's been 21 of them. 18 of 18 offenders have been sentenced, and there had been 148 plus years in prisons, and just one person has gotten a life sentence. Now let's take a look at a South American country that is Colombia that faces a lot of issues. One of those issues being human trafficking. As Colombia is a tier one country that meets requirement to have the government attention focused on removing human trafficking. The prior laws were inadequate and the issue just kept spreading and getting out of control. As of 2017, Colombia had found 124 victims, which was an increase from 68 in 2016. Sex trafficking and forced labor being the two main forms of human trafficking that occur in this country, and the main focus is getting women and girls that are recruited via like online apps like WhatsApp and webcams with modeling career promises and other jobs. Now we just take a look at Colombia's statistics. Forced labor is very prominent in this country due to the available agriculture and mining industries that exist. Victims are used to pick coal, alluvial gold, emerald mining, harvest coffee, and palm products in the grassy forest. Majority of victims are women, with 80% of them being unemployed, of lower income, and poorly educated, which is not a surprise why a lot of them go into the modeling scams and think that they're going to get a promising career simply because they come from very poor backgrounds. 2 million Venezuelans have fled their country since 2015, and it comes to no surprise that in Bogota, 75% of the victims were Venezuelan between the years 2016 and 2018. That created a spike of foreign nationals of just about 20% in 2020 in the first 4 months of the year. Now let's take a look at Colombia's legal support. In 2002, a legal framework began with the National Congress of Colombia approving the 747 in support to fight against human trafficking. Article 1 AAA of Palomero Protocol set a 10 to 15-year imprisonment for any perpetrator involved in this crime, as well as a fine ranging between 600 to 1,000 times the minimum wage, which tends to be about $340 US dollars a month. For reference, an American dollar is equivalent to 3,807 Colombian pesos. Another example is 5,000 Colombian pesos is like a breakfast that is equivalent to $2 in value in the US. Now I'm going to explain a little bit about Act 985 and the support that it has brought. In 2005, the National Congress enacted Act 985, which was a push to implement support to provide effective assistance to victims and have sanctions for those responsible for committing the crime. The act also created an anti-trafficking strategy and focuses to gather and develop information, present and assist victims of human trafficking, strengthen law enforcement and produce and procure cooperation, domestic and internationally. It also has assistance and adequate temporary housing, material assistance, transportation, legal advice, migratory assistance, identification and document, and physical and psychological care provided by the government. The medium-term support is protection provided is the legal counseling and representation in criminal, civil, or labor laws, occupational counseling to find a job, physical and psychological care, entrepreneurship for up to 6 to 9 months. The discussion that came with the research of this paper for human trafficking is that the current laws in place are lenient with punishment and don't serve as a real warning for those that risk participating in this crime, as the payoff is probably worth more than the few years that they will serve in jail or prison. Both state and countries have organizational help that have resources and have started to educate their population to better inform that within their community and just the world to better aid the fight against human trafficking. There was really no consistency across the board of the laws as they were all very different. Some were really high, some were really low. Law enforcement in all four different places had their own method to tackle the issue, and no two places had the same method enacted. And that just varies on just your state and location. Just Florida having ocean water across the three sides, it just different tactics that come with it um, compared to Nebraska that has just four states surrounding it. Colombia had to face the barrier that their citizens could be in a different country, or they could have a foreigner national trafficked within their own borders, and that puts another strain on their government on how to aid the victim and also punish the offender. Now let's look at the limitations that I encountered while doing this analyze of human trafficking across states and countries. It just depending on location and the type of trafficking method that is used there, it just it just had a different outcome. Like the US saw way more sex trafficking, but a country like Colombia saw a lot more forced labor and use of women and children in those positions. We see two different outcomes when aid is given depending on the circumstance and the way that the government will approach that those funds and help. Having individuals crossing borders brings a law barrier and how the country will react to non-citizens and what protections are offered to those individuals. Furthermore, I would say though it would be a better idea to have a wider range of U.S. states and countries be analyzed to get a better depiction overall. Perhaps have more states that are like near water or just within the middle of the country to get a better get better statistics, research, and preventive measures that kind of go hand in hand. In conclusion, this PowerPoint helped demonstrate why human trafficking is such a popular and lucrative investment for those that choose to be participants of this illicit form of crime. We as society need to work together to help eliminate this and stop having victims fall into the hands of traffickers. This crime has spread to every inch of the world and always seems to be adapting to the technology and other obstacles that have been implemented to eliminate it because the numbers keep on growing even with our modern day technology and help. There are obvious indicators making some individuals more vulnerable than others, like LGBTQ, family, all that other factors. Today we have law enforcement, legislation, healthcare, non-government programs, educators, and regular civilians that need to come together to fix the problem, close the gap of those that are going to fall into sex trafficking. By doing that, we can all stay informed and spread the knowledge to others and read the science. Human trafficking can be avoided and hopefully eliminated once and for all. And then we can see here an estimated 24.9 million victims are trapped in modern day slavery. And I hope that one day we can eliminate this number. Thank you.